join us this morning, unless nope, she hasn't joined us.
Then I'll convene.
I will suggest, if you'd like me to read off the names for attendance purposes, I can, but I am not seeing anybody that we don't know. So, and the minutes recorder can take the attendance from the recording. So if you'd like me to read off the names, I can, but it's not necessary.
All right. Okay, I'll bring the meeting to order. And I hope everybody's read the minutes of the last February 2nd. And I look for approval or changes. Look for a motion for approval.
I move we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Can we just do everybody hold their hands up for approval? Is that enough, Paul? Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. Are any adjustments to the agenda or announcements from MPC members? One thing I wanted to mention, by the way, is we're doing virtual today. We talked at the last meeting about maybe going to some in-person meetings, and I've sensed some reluctance from some people for doing that yet. So I suggest, as you guys decide if we want to stay virtual for a while, and then we can decide later if we want to actually have a person-to-person meeting, which I really like, by the way. But that seem okay with you guys? Okay. Comments from the audience. Anybody wishing to comment, raise their Zoom virtual hand. And then Paul will call on speakers in the order of raising of hands. The process now involves temporarily moving each speaker to Zoom panelist status, so there will be a transition time between each speaker. Paul will then ask if anybody wishes to speak. Some attendees may not be able to raise a virtual hand. And then I need to make this comment. The meeting will be conducted via Zoom webinar, allowing public access to Zoom meeting as an attendee. Anyone wishing to comment in general or during public hearing will be asked to raise their Zoom virtual hand when prompted by the chair at the beginning of each public comment opportunity. Speakers will be moved to the panelist status and asked to speak on a first-come basis. A limit of 3 minutes per person is requested. So now we're going to move on to the MPO redistribution funding recommendations. And the agenda item in staff presentation.
That would be Chair Dan Collister leading this agenda item today.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm Daniel Collister, and this item is the MPO redistribution funding recommendation. So I presented last month, but to recap, the MPO has received $2.4 million of funding as a result of federal redistribution. These funds are to be programmed at MPC's discretion for eligible projects. Last month, I presented 5 funding proposals that were received through our project solicitation. There are one-page summaries included in your packet materials of those 5 proposals. So the public comment period has now completed, and the Transportation Planning Committee has provided a funding recommendation for MPC that is presented as Exhibit A in the cover memo for this item in your packet. In summary, TPC recommends fully funding the proposals from Eugene and the proposals from Lane County, and providing roughly $860,000 to the Mill Street project in Springfield. This would allocate the full $2.4 million available. We did receive comments from the public that were submitted by Better Eugene and Springfield Transportation. Those comments are included in your packet as well in their entirety. Overall, BEST is supportive of the recommendation, but would rather see these more flexible funds going to support fewer pavement preservation projects when there are other revenue sources such as state or local gas taxes or street repair bond measures that could be used for those purposes. BEST also shares some constructive criticisms of the MPO's public engagement efforts and how that could be improved. We always welcome constructive criticism. The action that's recommended of MPC today is approval of resolution 2023-01 to program these new federal funds as presented in Exhibit A and amend the transportation improvement program. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
So I understand any public comment after our last meeting is what came in writing, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and those best supported, that means we're doing something right. How about within the group here? Comments, want to talk about it?
I'm sorry, if I can add one or two comments to Dan's presentation. I appreciate you characterizing this as doing something right. And I think what I just want to say, Dan last month when he presented the 5 projects that had applied for the funding mentioned how the MPO's goals, objectives, and other direction from the new regional transportation plan had really been a consideration in these applications rising to the top. And I think that's very important to revisit. Again, recall just over a year ago, you adopted a new regional transportation plan and you did a lot of work in updating the goals and objectives and the policies in that long range plan. And we talked a lot about how the MPO moving forward needed to do more work. We will be doing more work in refining and implementing those. But we also, as staff told you a year ago, that one of the main ways that we do that in terms of trying to achieve those goals and objectives is through the use of the MPO's discretionary funding. And I think it's important to note today that the 5 projects being funded, you have a bike share expansion project, which clearly is alternative modes and greenhouse gas reduction oriented. You have pavement preservation projects, which is another priority of the MPO. You have projects that address safety, and you have a project that combines pavement preservation and addressing safety with protected bike lane and improved pedestrian facilities. Again, not only for safety and pavement preservation, but even for helping to address greenhouse gas reduction through making bicycle and pedestrian modes easier for the users. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. Other comments from the other members? Well, I'll call for a motion of approval. See now, I mean, okay, a motion approving resolution 2023-01.
I move we approve resolution, whatever that number was that you just said.
I'll second that.
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise their hands, say aye.
Aye.
The hands I see so far up, there's some down there I can't see, so I don't know what, they may be staff, but it appears we have a majority, correct? Paul?
Yes, Chair, I don't see any hands that were not raised, so I believe that's unanimous.
Okay, yeah, I didn't go into, those that didn't raise them would have been no's. Okay, so we'll go on to the next. The next agenda item is the OMPOC legislative priorities. And what I'm on OMPOC, and what is coming for us is legislature issues that are maybe of interest to our group. And they've asked us to look at these, they're in the packet, and see what kind of comments we want to make. So we'll carry them back to OMPOC. And so I guess ask for staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to lead and probably handle a lot of this presentation for you. And I am going to share my screen here in a moment. If I can, again, find the, there we go. There's the document I want to share. So this document is in your packet. However, I have done a couple of quick updates to it. As Chair Mo said, the Oregon MPO Consortium, or OMPOC, met recently and went through the early list of transportation related legislation, which frankly has not changed a lot in the past month, and had a discussion at the OMPOC meeting about what priorities OMPOC might want to weigh in on. So in your packet, as attachment 1 to this agenda item, is a list of the things that OMPOC proposed as possible priorities. And the direction from that last OMPOC meeting was to go back to each individual MPO board, and ask for concurrence or input or concerns with any of these, and direction to your OMPOC members. Again, Chair Mo is one of those. And OMPOC will again meet in just a couple of weeks on March 20th to hold a quick meeting to see if we can come to consensus on these. And then the ones that OMPOC does have consensus on, OMPOC would start to communicate its support for. OMPOC needs, under its bylaws, to have unanimous support for any policy position. So any one MPO can essentially negate one of these priorities, but that's fine. That's the way the consortium works. Mm-hmm. As I noted, I put a few quick updates on here, so that's why I shared my screen. First of all, a quick apology, but the first bill, HB 2101, was mistakenly labeled 2102 in your packet. It's actually 2101. Other than that, I've put just a quick summary to let you know what's happening with each bill as of yesterday. And frankly, not a lot is moving yet in any significant way on any of these. So HB 2101, which is the ODOT Fund Exchange Program, did have its first hearing back on January 31st, which is a good sign of life, but nothing has happened to the bill since then. HB 2677, which requires funding for maintenance whenever ODOT adds additional lane capacity, has not had any action other than being assigned to a committee. HB 2095, which is the photo radar, or authorizes cities to operate photo radar, did hold its first public hearing again back on January 31st, but nothing further has happened with that bill. Moving down the list real quick, local speed limit setting was identified as a priority for OMPOC. That is not necessarily tied to a specific bill, although it's currently incorporated as part of HB 2095. HB 3113 is the bill that would support the ODOT's Great Streets program. That has not had any action yet. ODOT then on the next entry did indicate support for tolling and indicated that OMPOC supports the League of Oregon Cities stance that tolling should pay for both the project and the impacts of tolling on local neighborhoods. HB 2619, the one that would modify the membership of the Oregon Transportation Commission, has not had any action. The next entry on your attachment is not specific to the bills listed. It is more generally a support for the position that electric vehicles should be paying their fair share for the use of the transportation system, for the operations and maintenance in particular of that system. There certainly was a lot of discussion at OMPOC, and there was a little bit at MPC last time about how this could be implemented, and does it get implemented as a tax on electricity or a tax on the use of the electric vehicle, or how would that happen? All of those things, from my understanding, are under discussion in the back rooms of the legislature, but of the bills that we've seen so far, there have been no actions moving any of them forward. So we suspect that those backroom discussions are trying to iron out details and perhaps combine some of these competing or duplicative bills into one. Finally, OMPOC identified Senate Joint Resolution 2, which is the one that would allow for expanding the use of the state highway fuel revenue that's currently restricted by the Oregon Constitution. That has not had any action by the legislature yet. So again, these are the positions that OMPOC would like to support, and we're asking for your feedback and your direction to Councilor Mo as your OMPOC member.
So, the committee members, speak up.
If I may, Chair, chime in for a minute, Lucy Venice. I want to just check in on the great streets. The importance of that for Eugene is, of course, we have state highways that are sort of main streets in our downtown. So because those are already streets in our downtown, my understanding, the concern is whether those would be eligible and whether AMPAC has taken a position on that. It's not quite clear from the summary.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I can respond real quick. Mayor, yes, AMPAC has specifically heard that concern and shares that concern. And actually the summary does specifically note that AMPAC supports making the Great Streets funding available, not just for state highways, but also local streets that serve as main streets in jurisdictions.
Okay.
And so that would be part of AMPAC's position, is to advocate for that expansion of the program.
Okay, so yeah, it was the language. It's just that they're formally state highways that are now serving as streets that would be covered.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, and then the other one, the 2301 around the EVs. I mean, I was the one that sort of questioned this last time, and I'm totally understand that somehow we have to pay for our roads and that electric vehicles are using the roads. So I'm on board with that. The question I have is, do electric vehicles now, when they register, are they paying a higher fee already? I mean, is there another point of contact for those electric vehicles where we are already charging them? And are there also other considerations around what the simplest and most effective way would be to ensure that they contribute to the cost of the roads?
Mayor, I'm going to attempt to respond a little bit to this, and I see that Vidal just raised his hand. He might want to weigh in also. I honestly would have to go back and double check the current methods of collecting the registration fees. But I also know that Oregon, as you know, has many incentives right now for electric vehicles. So I think there's an offset there where perhaps the net revenue is not really being collected. In terms of the simplest way of doing that, I'm going to speak only off the cuff because I have followed it for so long, but I think the Origo program, or the mileage-based fee, would be the way to go, because that is a fee or a way of collecting revenue, not just from electric vehicles, but from all vehicles, that more closely ties their use of the system to the revenue that they would, or the expense they would incur, the revenue they would pay to the state. So I would say that while some of these bills are talking about charging electricity use, or charging battery recharge, or taxing battery recharging, and other approaches, although I have no voice in this, I wonder if the legislature shouldn't consider somehow mandating the Origo program for electric vehicles.
So can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you. I really, Paul, good job on that. I don't have a whole lot to add beyond that. Right now, it's voluntary for folks who have the electric vehicles to join that program, so that they can get off of the tax, the gas part of it, and then track the mileage and so forth. But that would be, for more clarification for everyone here, that could be a topic that we could probably bring back here and revisit, if you will, on what the current state of the system is and how that transition is actually going, as far as us moving away from the gas, if you will, onto the electric system.
Sean Van Gordon.
Thank you. I think I would want to know a little bit more about that. And I think the question, I guess, from a policy perspective is maybe the position, like, is there an actual document, report, study from ODOT that compares the sort of the share that EVs are contributing to maintenance in the roadway compared to what a conventional automobile is, right? Because that would be the place that we would want to kind of end up, is like everybody's paying, for residential use of the roadway, roughly the same amount. And then the other question that I have, Paul, is SJR2. Remind me what what that wasn't just expanded a little ways, right? That was, you could use gas tax dollars on anything related to the transportation system, right?
Mayor, it isn't quite anything related to the transportation system. Right now, the constitutional limitation is that you can only use that revenue within the roadway right of way.
Mm-hmm.
This would expand it so that you could use it outside the right of way, as long as that use reduced the burden on the right of way or the pollution from motor vehicles on roads. In other words, it's a way to try and fund infrastructure or improvements outside the right of way that reduce emissions or reduce traffic. Such things as bike paths, for instance, with the assumption there that if you improve bike paths out of the roadway, you're going to take traffic off the roadway and reduce pollution.
Did it, and where is it now? Is it actually moving at all?
No, Mayor, it received its initial assignment to a committee, but it hasn't had a hearing or anything yet.
Yeah, I don't know. Like what I would love to see more information about it before. I would love OMPOC to be kind of neutral towards it right now until we got a little bit more information, because the standard, I think, makes a lot, like what that standard is makes a lot of sense, about like, well, how far off the right of way, what is substantial, right? And, you know, and we're always looking for dollars for transportation systems, but I don't know that we can fully, if it's going to be a hard explanation to the public to essentially take a pile of user fees, and if they moved 100% one direction or 100% the other. So I would love to see more, like if maybe report back on that one, and if it may not go anywhere if it's not got a hearing already.
Mayor, I tend to think from what I've heard that it's unlikely to go anywhere. I don't want to say that as a definitive opinion at this point, but
it's actually being recorded, Paul. We'll come back to this. No,
I have asked around and I have not heard anybody that sees it having current signs of life. And it certainly is one where it's complex, and it would be difficult, of course, as a constitutional amendment. It not only would need to pass the legislature, but then go to a statewide vote. Mm-hmm. And that's where that would become even more complex.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Gordon. Moving on to other members. Like we're doing pretty good.
Commissioner Lovell, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paul. Hey, I'm just curious about the tolling thing. I think, for me to really get behind that, I'd like to have some sort of an amendment there that says something to the effect of when large major projects are paid for, the toll is removed. I remember back in San Diego when they built the Coronado Bay Bridge when I was in the Navy. Of course, I don't want to date people, but that was when rocks were lava. So they charged $2 a trip to go over the bridge until it was paid for. Then they removed the toll. And then they found out within the next 10 years, the bridge was going into dilapidation from maintenance. So they came back and assessed a maintenance toll on it. So I just think that kind of thought or framework needs to be within that idea as we move forward. So it just doesn't, some of those costs don't just get assumed and then we get bitten in the behind later. So that's my only comment there. Thank you.
Okay, one item that was actually discussed pretty thoroughly was the radar speed signs, and the concern was turning into revenue producing cities, which they sort of say that's not going to happen, but it got a lot of attention at OMPOC. Okay, moving on.
Chair.
Yes.
If I may, if there's no further input on these specific priorities, and both myself and Kelly Clark, who's the lead OMPOC staff, are listening to this, so we will provide you as the OMPOC member with the thoughts and the comments here for your participation on March 20th. But if I may, I'm hearing interest both this month and last month on an agenda item that I think maybe Vidal and I could work on trying to put together for your information in the coming months, which is around that nexus between EV vehicles and funding.
EV is coming along and it's going to be, it's the future, of course, we know that. And then go ahead and do that. I guess that's a good idea if the other members agree. Okay. Okay. Mr. Lovell?
Yeah, thank you again. Just wanted to add to a little bit of that. Part of the road maintenance requirements and destruction of roads is based on weight. So we have to also consider, as we're doing this EV kind of thought, that those cars weigh considerably more than most, combustion cars. And so I think that's probably some of what people are weighing in on. Or do we just change the whole thing where we just have a flat registration fee that's more than what we're paying now and the gas tax goes away? I mean, that could be a radical thought, but it's swirling around in my head.
My thinking is mileage would be a big contributor to whatever they pay, somehow to determine that. Miles each vehicle travels, plus might have to put weight in there too, type of vehicle. There's going to be electric buses, electric trucks coming along, so it's going to be heavier, more use. Okay. We'll move on to the next, okay, the ODOT update is the next.
Chair, 6C legislative update, please.
I thought that's sort of, yeah, you're, okay, legislative priority.
Legislative update.
Okay, yep. They look like the same one to me.
And you're right, there is a lot of overlap here. Legislative update is on here because I committed last month to having a monthly report back to you. So I didn't want to take it off the agenda. However, we just covered probably 90% of it because, to be honest, there has not been much movement on any of the bills that I have been highlighting. I'm going to really quickly share my screen again here. If you give me a second to get the right one up. I'm going to show you two quick documents. One is this one, which you saw last month, which was the 10 or so bills out of the 70 that I was tracking that seemed to be of more significance. Again, we pretty much covered this under the OMPOC item. There hasn't been really any significant movement on any of these. I will say that of the ones that have had the first hearings, I think these two at the top, the photo radar and the ODOT fund exchange programs, do show the most signs of life, not just because they held the first hearings, but that's what I've been hearing or what I've understood from other sources. One of the bills that I don't have on this list, and I did it for certain reasons, is there is a bill in front of the legislature related to DLCD's new climate-friendly equitable communities rules that were implemented last year or adopted last year. I did not put this on the list because while it has a transportation nexus, it is more land use related, and it also is not directly related to MPOs, it's fully related to the local jurisdictions. But it's a bill that would be of great interest in this area, and I certainly have been tracking it outside of this body and have been giving updates to many of your staff. That bill is interesting in that it would be fairly significant. It would suspend the implementation of the CFAC rules and require LCDC to go back and revisit them and make further changes. I asked the League of Oregon Cities last Friday at their weekly update about it, and they said that there are definitely backroom discussions still going on and that they're cautiously optimistic that bill will move forward. But so far it hasn't had any formal action by the legislature. The last thing I want to show you real quick, if I can again try and change my sharing, I'm going to switch to one more document just to keep you informed. The one that you now see on your screen is what the Lane Act, the Area Commission on Transportation, will be considering as its priorities at its meeting next week. Many of these are the same as what we just discussed. Essentially all of them are, except for one, which is this Senate Bill 445 near the bottom, which would establish a rural traffic safety grant fund to provide grants to rural cities for installation and improvement of traffic control devices and crosswalks. Obviously, this is of great interest to the Act because the Act has a lot of rural representatives on it. So that's the one bill that the Act is considering a priority that's different than what I've shown you for your purposes or for OMPOC. I just wanted to quickly highlight all that. If there's any questions or anything I can help with, please let me know.
Speak up, everybody. I don't see any hands raised yet. There's one.
Well, as a rural community, I would certainly support Senate Bill 445. I mean, we struggle in Coburg, as many smaller cities do, Springfield included, though it's not a real small city anymore. And as Mayor Venus said, our main street is a county road, and it is a transportation corridor. It is a freight corridor, and we're struggling with that. We have been funded, I understand, for a study of some sort of traffic diversion, but I have no idea where we are on that. So I would certainly support that bill. Thank you.
Is that something we'll pass on OPOC, or is this going to have to be a universal support?
Counselor, that bill is not on OMPOC's list as a priority, and it's not really one that's of major significance to the MPOs because they tend to deal more with the urbanized and metropolitan areas, and whereas this is a bill focused on the rural communities. That said, let me just mention real quick that there's always a question of that definition of rural for different purposes. For instance, Mayor Bell, Coburg is obviously part of the MPO and part of this metropolitan area for federal purposes. It's considered non-rural under the federal definitions. But I read the language in this bill, and it defines rural as any city, town, or other community in the state with a population of 15,000 or less. So for the purposes of this, Coburg would be eligible.
Anybody else? How should we handle her suggestion, her request? Coburg's.
Please, Mayor Bell, let me know if I'm wrong, but Councilor Morrow, I heard a comment there. I think it's something that certainly the MPO could choose to comment on, although I have to be honest, this bill is not yet has not had its movement yet. The one way you could, if you wanted to weigh in on, is recall that the MPO, your body, has a seat as a member of the Lane Act, and I actually serve as your member on the Lane Act. So if you would like me to convey this body's and Coburg's support for Senate Bill 445, I will do that next week.
Okay, Sean Van Gordon and Mayor Venus, she sort of had her thumb up.
I think that would be a great idea, right? Like it's the Lane Act would be the best way to advocate for the rural interests here, and we should just support that.
Okay.
And that's why my thumb was up, because I agree. I think we should just support the Lane Act and support Coburg's request.
It looks like that should be part of our direction.
Thank you. I will do that.
I see lots of thumbs going up, by the way. Okay. We through with legislation, everybody? Okay. Now we're going to go to ODOT report.
Yes, so I don't have a lot to say, but I think the most impressive update, and you may have heard me say this before, come March 9th, the OTC will be looking at the draft 2427 STIP for approval, and that will also kick off the comment period for that draft STIP. There's there's a number of projects, at least in this area, and I think more than half, if I'm not mistaken, actually touches or at least is within the MPO area. So again, your comments is a way of ODOT recognizing and understanding that it touches you, and that we need to incorporate those suggestions, ideas, thoughts that you may have concerning those particular projects, that we account for those as we continue the process going through through the 24-27 STIP. That said, the comment period will actually end towards the end of April, and shortly thereafter, formal approval will the OTC will handle. Both comments could be done online as well as in person in this area here at the Springfield ODOT office on 2080 Laurel Street in Springfield for March 23rd from 5 to 6:30. I'll have a meeting here in the Pisgah, Mount Pisgah conference room to talk about the STIP for the public, anyone who wants to come in and talk about any projects. I'm actually going to have it as a 2-day event, one on March 23rd and the second one on April 10th, trying to give it a little bit of time between the two events. And both of those events are going to be from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. to allow folks who have a busy day to actually stop by in the evening and sit down and chat. We can talk about the upcoming 24-27 STIP projects, and also I'll entertain any current needs or concerns folks may have. That's pretty much it that I have as far as updates, concerns right now, and I'll be happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Hey, everybody. I guess maybe we'll see you at your meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Paul, it appears I'm at the end of my agenda page. It doesn't say anything about adjourning the meeting. Am I getting close to that? There's something.
Counselor, yes, you are. And I actually would like to try and, if there's no other discussion, I'd like to try and do two other things here, or one other thing here, if I may.
Okay.
There was a little bit of a confusion, and I was trying to attend to everything else, including following this meeting for you, but we do have our final two new 2023 MPC members that have joined us today. The two LTD board members who have been appointed by LTD to serve on MPC are present in the meeting, Susan Cox and Kelly Sutherland. So please welcome them and recognize that they're here, and we'll be happy to have them with us this year.
I look forward to working with them.
Right on.
And moving on, Paul.
With that, Counselor, I believe we are done today. Thank you very much.
Trying to call me my officer. I'm not answering. Sorry about that. We have upcoming meetings on April the 6th and May the 4th and June the 1st. Make sure those are on your calendars. And they're going to be virtual meetings for now. And then is there anything else from the committee that wants to say anything? Well, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you. It's been fun.